Hello everyone, and on this nice long evening here in Dublin, I thought I'd do my second part of my perspective on Irish relations with people from Israel Palestine. So earlier on today I did a video talking about the Irish perspective on the Israelis and how we generally feel in Ireland that what the Israelis are doing in Palestine to the Palestinians is, by all intents and purposes, a terrible tragedy. That it's just going to build up resentment against Israel from the Palestinian community for generations to come. In this second part, I want to talk about their relations with the other side of the coin, which is the Palestinians. You'll often see Palestinian flags flying in Ireland from people who show support to the Palestinians, and they show support not particularly due to the violence of groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah. In fact, most Irish people have little or no time for the use of violence to achieve political ends. We experienced enough of that during our recent conflict in Northern Ireland known as the Troubles, which went on from the 1960s to the 1990s and which involved various acts of aggression and terrorism against the rest of the United Kingdom, particularly England, by a sectarian paramilitary group known as the Irish Republican Army, and also various attacks perpetrated against the Republic of Ireland by groups known as the UVF or the UDA. Now, there were other groups involved as well, like the INLA, but the IRA and Irish Republican Army, UVF, Ulster Volunteer Force, and UDA, Ulster Defence Army, they were the three main groups involved in that conflict, with the British Army and police kind of stuck in the middle, but being more supportive of the two unionist groups rather than the nationalist one. And that is being very diplomatic by saying just that. So as a person who grew up during the latter stages of that conflict here in Dublin, we teach our kids and people who are my age and older fully remember this conflict and how brutal, savage and destructive it actually was, not just to property and the loss of people's lives, but also to the social cohesion of various different groups in Ireland and our relationship to the United Kingdom. So when we see similar groups in other areas, even though they're not exactly the same and they have different priorities and take things to different extremes, we naturally kind of rebel against them, basically. So we, as I said, we have little or no time for Hamas or Hezbollah. When it comes to the Palestinian people, though, the average person on the ground, the average family living in Gaza or living on the West Bank, we have nothing but sympathy for them, because again we can see reflections of their situation in our own history, of people dispossessed of their land, who are being treated not quite well, and in many cases quite brutally, by a more well-armed, well-organised and well-funded group, in this case the Israeli Defence Force. Look, it's like this. When it comes to politicians and politics in any parts of the world, politicians are only ever interested in acquiring power for themselves. And that is a video I intend to do at a later stage, which is the true motivation of politicians, whether they be from the Republic of Ireland, from the USA, from Britain, Israel, or China, or anywhere else in the world. But in saying that, the Palestinian people, we, as I said, have a lot of sympathy for. My own personal perspective of it, having lived for some part of my life in Israel, Palestine, I have experienced life living with people on both sides of the accord, and I find it's just sad that people who could and should get on much better together can't seem to share the wonderful land that is that area, that part of the planet. Rich in history, rich in culture, beautiful natural environment, and it would just be nice to think that at some point in the future they would be able to coexist together without brutally murdering each other. The only way I can see this happening is for a complete sea change within Israel and a complete sea change within the Palestinian community. Israel and the people who live there have to understand that just because your people lived on a certain plot of land about 2,000 years ago does not give you automatically rights to that land, no matter what your religious texts say. It really doesn't. And in fact, there's nothing really in the Bible at all, to maintain that that the Israelis have automatic rights to this land 2,000 years after the Romans kicked them out of that region. On the other side of the coin, the Palestinians, well, look, the Israelis are there and they're not going anywhere. So it's kind of, you can keep going with this brutal conflict until basically everybody is dead, or you can try to come to some sort of compromise where the two of you live in reasonable harmony with each other. You're always going to get extremists on both sides who are going to manipulate this situation to their own ends, but it's trying to keep those extremists from gaining traction and manipulating the people's emotions is the key element to this. Like the 1990s, it was when I was there, was a good period because Yitzhak Rabin and the PLO had managed to come to some sort of an arrangement, and if that can happen once, we can always hope that it'll happen again. For the Palestinians, violence is never the answer. As much as you'd like to think so, it never is. As much as we react towards it, it never is. You have to negotiate with people. You can't just keep fighting. It just doesn't work that way. We had to negotiate with the British in order to become independent from the United Kingdom. At the end of the day, that's what it took. After all the bloody battles and hardship that our people went through in order to gain independence, it took sitting down around the table and hashing out the issues for us to act and making compromises for us to actually become the country that we are today here in Ireland. The only way to truly do this for the Palestinians is to have friends. The only really place that they're going to gain friends in is, I'm afraid to say, the United States of America. There's a large community of people in the US who are Palestinian American or who are sympathetic towards the Palestinian cause. And if they became a massive voting bloc, similar to the way that the Israeli voting bloc is in the States and the Irish voting bloc is in the States, then they might have some degree of influence on the politicians who work there and who control the US. At the moment, they're just floundering, and only by gaining this sort of influence through lobbying can they actually bring the US into the equation to to mediate between the two sides, because it's the only one that will. The only two other options would be China and Russia, and they're not going to do it. So that's the only way I can see there being any peace between the Israelis and Palestinians in the future, is through this sort of mediation, and is through influence in the United States, battling for the hearts and minds of the American people, because the way things are going at the moment, it can't really stand. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the Palestinians. Have a good evening. Bye bye.